There's no place in the world
like Rodeo Drive.
I'm Parry Eson, your host.
And I'm your field correspondent, Jason E.C. Wright.
Welcome to Rodeo Drive, the podcast.
On today's show, art and fashion get blended by creative new voices.
It's less for me about some stale notion of inclusivity or diversity and more about allowing folks to fully express themselves in the space that they should have always had a claim to.
That's Antwaun Sargent. He is a writer and curator who is reclaiming and reimagining Black identity and beauty. Hear my conversation with him coming up.
And what Antwaun also represents is a fluidity between disciplines: art, fashion, food, and publishing. You can see it at work here on Rodeo Drive, where boutiques that once mainly sold clothing now offer more curated exhibition and retail spaces.
Like Saint Laurent Rive-Droit, conceived by the house's creative director Anthony Vaccarello and exclusive to its Paris and Rodeo Drive boutiques. And Jason, you got to check it out when you were recently on the street.
That's right, Perry. This installation in the Rodeo Drive boutique follows a tradition that Saint Laurent established with the Gagosian stores in the late 1970s, where all the objects are meant to expand the world in different ways. Vaccarello worked with the Hervé cousins of Hervé Manufacturier, and so this is what I saw.
So you have a surfboard and furniture as a table that is made in this beautiful wood that they're known for, but there's also lighters and playing cards. There are branded headphones, but also footwear and bags. But then in the back section we have vinyl, we have art and design magazines and books, really expanding on the way that the art collector is intersecting in the fashion world, and those from the fashion side are collecting objects. And it's a beautiful way of seeing this evolution of the stores being more than just a retail space and a point of experience for the world, but adding more objects into the daily lives of people that are already fans of these designers, such as Saint Laurent.
Saint Laurent Rive-Droit is one example of this evolution of the boutique. And Celine is engaging in a similar way, as Jason reports from the Drive.
Yes, and just as Eddie Slimane moved as creative director of Saint Laurent over to creative director of Celine, we'll now shift our attention from the Saint Laurent store across the street to the Celine store. It's set up to feel a bit more like a museum exhibition. It's walkable, it's touchable, but still presented with the same vigor and care and meticulous nature as the construction of the garments you'll find inside.
So we have this marble facade on the outside as well as the inside. Things are presented in a way that you can touch, but also very categorized based on their usage. And again, it still ties to a consumer that is in the fashion world and the art world and collecting things with a bit more intention. And it's really part of the reason why we really love being here on Rodeo. I think that Perry can attest to that, as we've kind of done research that's / shopping. It's been a wonderful time to go into these boutiques and feel like we just came out of a museum. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. You've just set up exactly why our next guest is the perfect person to talk to.
That's right. You got to talk to Antwaun Sargent.
And as you know, Jason, Antwaun is a very important figure who's reclaiming Black identity, and he's truly engaged the fashion industry and many brands to kind of pay attention and to become a part of this universality of sharing these images.
Indeed. He's a curator and author of the new Black Vanguard, Photography Between Art and Fashion, which is a fantastic book that I immediately included in our library. This is also part of a touring exhibition that's currently on view at the Cleveland Museum of Art through mid-September of 2022. He's been published in leading publications including the New York Times and Vogue, and he's director of Gagosian, a global network of art galleries with one of the outposts here in Beverly Hills.
Antwaun and I met around 10 years ago when Instagram was first taking off, and we both had a very clear idea of the potential for image making of that new medium. It was great to talk to him now about the dissolving of boundaries between art and fashion today, about diversity and inclusion and how to do it authentically, and about the amazing Virgil Abloh show that he has coming up. We also both love and crave the in-person shopping experience, so I asked him first what Rodeo Drive means to him.
Rodeo Drive is a space that is a real representation, a physical representation of what we call fashion, you know, the beauty of fashion, the exclusivity of fashion, the sort of craftsmanship, and, you know, everything else in between. I really do think that it's definitely relevant because I'm personally someone who I need to try things on. I as much of a huge sort of fashion consumer that I am, I always go and try things on, and I'm more likely to, buy something. I'm sort of an outlier in this, but I don't actually shop all that much online. And so for me, a place like Rodeo Drive is extraordinarily important because I get to go and, touch the fabrics, try them on, talk to the folks in the shops and, really sort of engage in a community, because for me, fashion really is about a community, and the Rodeo Drive is a representation of that.
I love your dedication. It shows in your style too. I have to say, I probably saw you for the first time like many, many years ago, like in 2013 or something, like on the gram. And I was like, you really kind of embodied this voracious curiosity in the act of discovery and discovering art. And your style was so signature, and that whole kind of playful aspect of you being in the spaces, it really just hit right for me.
At the beginning of the gram, back then, when no one really knew. I mean, you had a really sort of clear sense of what you were doing, and Jaja had a really, Jaja Faye had a really good sense of what they were doing. But I think, a lot of people back then, especially in the art and fashion world, actually were very much confused about, what were the possibilities of Instagram, and the possibilities of sharing your style, your taste in art, your concerns, on a platform like that. But yeah, no, it's like now night and day between.
It really is. I know.
It's 10 years ago almost.
So we're also witnessing changing representation in fashion and art, which your work specifically deals with. You've made a significant impact with your book, The New Black Vanguard, Photography Between Art and Fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, fashion and art in that regard have made, unbelievable progress, but, it's obviously just not enough, right? Because we're talking about sort of decades and sometimes, of exclusion, right? And I think that now that we're in sort of a maybe 5-year period of, folks trying to sort of be really committed to making the world just reflective of the people that, live in it. And invite, voices that should have been there all along into the conversation. And so, I think that like my own work has really just been about having an interest in, Black culture, Black art, Black fashion. And because I used to be a full-time writer, I just wanted to know what was happening, sort of in those scenes, right? And and to explore the nuances and similarities and differences and in those cultures, right? And in sort of allow each individual artist or designer that I've worked with to sort of set the course. It's less for me about some stale notion of inclusivity or diversity and more about allowing folks to fully express themselves in the space that they should have always had a claim to. And so what I try to do is just to make sure that every project is the fullest expression of the artist or designer that it can be. Because, the flip side of that is just sort of like doing things for the sake of like showing that like you believe in diversity or inclusion or, in this sort of really limiting way, right? And it's about sort of being rigorous and inviting people in and holding them to the same sort of, standards of everyone else and making sure that, everyone, that when you invite them in, that they're not just invited in, but they're also supported with the right resources that you would have extended to anybody else, right? And so it's all those things, The
performative aspect of collaboration in the negative sense, in the sense of like, tokenism, that doesn't resonate, and it doesn't have to be there anymore, No,
I'm with you.
Yeah. You've said, I know you've said, and I feel very similarly, like that art and fashion have given your life form. Can you speak on that? What do you mean by that?
What I mean by it's given to my life shape is that, I work in these industries and, they're such a huge part of who I am. It's like when you're in sort of the culture fields, it's not like you clock out at 6 p.m., it is an ongoing exploration of a full life. That's what I mean sort of by it gives me shape, but also just like, in a literal sense, we know that in the fashion world there's seasons, and so you have that flow of time. In the art world, there are big sort of moments around art fairs that happen every, the same part of the time of the year. And I think that more and more, given, the collaboration that happens now, that was so not common, when we were sort of starting out. And it was sort of like weird, and artists was thought, visual artists were thought as less serious if they collaborated with fashion brands, if they appeared in fashion magazines. And now you just really have folks operating in a real post-medium, condition, right? And so you might see an artist, do a collaboration with Louis Vuitton, or you might see a painting that was on a wall up here on a Dior bag, and that is increasingly happening. And I think that the worlds are increasingly in conversation. It's really great to see Carrie Mae Weems, for example, just shoot the latest Prada campaign, because I think that there are ideas in both that are super important and that, allow for a dialogue.
I remember, like you said, 10 years ago, artists were super nervous to do something in the fashion realm because they thought that it would discount, their art practice and, could be harmful to their reputation, or if it went in the wrong direction, it would all be over.
I also think artists in general, in the art world in general, and also the fashion world actually, have actually made a real commitment to leaving behind some of these sort of dated notions of being sort of high art or high fashion or high culture, right? And I think that there's a real democratic spirit that is energizing both of those spaces, that allows for, artists and fashion designers to reach new audiences, because that's now baked into the DNA of what they do, right? The art world, used to be about a few prize collectors, right? A few prize museums, right? And the fashion world used to be about, a certain sort of income class, right? They share that, right? Both art and fashion shares that. And so now, folks are trying to sort of reach out to, younger audiences, and, people that, come from different, backgrounds, right? And I think that has driven some of the collaborative spirit that we've been witnessing in the last, several years.
So you are a director now at the Gagosian, and so I was wondering your thoughts on the power of art and fashion in close proximity as far as spatially. The Gagosian Beverly Hills is right around the corner from Rodeo Drive. What do you see the synergies being in that?
Yeah, I mean, we just represent folks who, work between those spaces, fluidly, there's a number of artists, Ro Etheridge being one of them, on the roster who, make no distinction. Ro shows his images in the gallery. You also have, other folks as well who, just on that level, that sort of is working in those spaces, and sometimes that work ends up in the gallery, right? And I think that's the sort of beauty of a gallery space, is that that it is essentially a blank canvas, right? And, and then you have folks, like Gursky, right? Like who sort of would not say he works in fashion, but like in his show that's up in New York right now, he has an image of a runway, you know, of models on a runway, right? And it's not necessarily about sort of a traditional sort of, you know, look at, you know, fashion on a runway, presentation of clothes. It really is about sort of, you know, networks and communities and, you know, composition and scale and, you know, all of those things. But him choosing that sort of iconic sort of moment, you know, in fashion, right, the model on a runway, to sort of express these other sort of more formal qualities just shows that, like, you know, folks are thinking really widely and broadly about the ways in which fashion and art and, you know, are just a part of the culture. And then there's also, you know, on the, you know, the estates on the roster, you know, the arguably the greatest fashion photographer of, you know, of all time is, you know, on
Richard Avedon
on our roster, and is someone that, you know, we're always returning to his work, and like, you know, and so like there's just like all of these sort of folks that sort of are, you know, sort of operate in, you know, these, you know, in these different, you know, spaces that that really, like, I think allow for us all to sort of just have fuller expressions of who we are.
Yeah, and to create a more fluid existence which doesn't silo itself or tether itself to either or. Any plans on curating a show at the Gagosian in Beverly Hills that you're able to reveal?
The LA team has been really welcoming. Next year, I'm doing a couple of actually projects in LA. I can't say what they are yet, but I will be sort of doing shows at the gallery that is really about bringing together the art, the fashion, the music worlds, you know, for a really great cause. Definitely one of the great things about the gallery, having, you know, 19 locations around the world, is that you can sort of, you know, drop into these different art communities and present, you know, new and different ideas, right? And even our shop, you know, like the Gagosian shop, we just opened another one in London. You know, like, even that space is an opportunity for artists to sort of think about product and artists to think about sort of fashion.
So I guess one last question, and I think you kind of answered it, but what are you most excited about right now at this moment?
I'm working on a show. For the last 3 years, me and Virgil Abloh, the late fashion designer and artist, you know, sort of engaged in conversations that turned into me curating the last installment of his show, Figures of Speech, at the Brooklyn Museum that opens on July 1. And I'm just super excited because, you know, Virgil was, you know, one of the great sort of thinkers that, you know, merged both art and fashion. And you know, he started as an architect, and this show, given his untimely, you know, death at the age of 41, several months ago, you know, this show is really sort of his last show as a living artist, right? And it really sort of thinks about the practice in sort of these really, really dynamic ways. And, you know, we have taken a very untraditional approach to the show, and we went back to his roots in architecture. And, you know, the show is really sort of about sort of an intervention, architectural intervention in the building, but also about sort of the ways that he made across media, right? And the ways that, you know, it could be 1 hour he's designing a dress, the next hour he's designing a sculpture, the next he's making music, right? Like, it really was, it had this great fluidity that I think actually helped usher in a lot of what we talked about, you know, today. And so I'm really just excited to, you know, honor an artist who, you know, really was perhaps the most influential artist of his generation, and has really sort of pushed us all to sort of rethink our boundaries and rethink what was possible. And so it's just really sort of it's been an honor to work on the show, to learn from Virgil, and to complete it and to bring it to, audiences this summer.
Well, I can't wait to see that, because I did see the show in Chicago when it opened.
Totally different show. It's
The
only similarity is the name.
Right. Okay, great. I love that. I'm obsessed with that, because I was like, where is his like formative experiences? Like, it was just kind of like showing the aftermath, and I knew there was so much more there.
We really sort of have thought about that with this show, and really sort of thought about sort of, if he says he makes everything for his 17-year-old self, then what was the 17-year-old Virgil doing, right? What were his ideas? What was his ideas in college? What? And so, and it's really sort of interesting, having gone through, the archive, and to see some of his, early homework. He's at 18, 19, 20, he's talking about Louis Vuitton, and he's talking about his own, and so we do try to sort of show the journey, and I'm just really excited for the show, because also it's just like, I got to collaborate with a great team. His team is, amazing. Even through grief, they sort of stayed on it, and, just really sort of great. And the Brooklyn Museum team also were really amazing to work with. It is, again, not a traditional exhibition. And so for them to wrap their heads around it and sort of not only do that, but also, get on board fully and commit resources and, problem solve, with all the logistical sort of stuff. It's just been really a joy to see a museum really sort of step into a position of flexibility. Yeah, that is just generally not how they sort of operate. And if they do, it's planned 9 years in advance, right? And so...
Right.
And so, Virgil worked with a real fluidity. So he was not, planning things like, he had an idea, it came to mind, he executed, right? And he had
that was
the
him.
team around
there was a spontaneous, aspect to his work that gave it such like an energy and a kick.
Exactly. And some of it worked and some of it didn't. But but the sort of the commitment to it, I think, is what, for me, is really, really important, because it sends a signal, I think, to young creatives, whether that's in art or in fashion, that you should execute and explore your ideas. And you don't need, them to all be a best idea or whatever, but in that, exactly, to Virgil, everything was a prototype, and, which meant that, like, one idea led to the next, right? And I think that, like, that's how you get someone like him, right? That's how you get someone so influential in this culture. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm really, really excited about it.
Well, you just made me very excited too. I can't wait to see that. So,
well,
Antwaun, thank you. This was amazing, and I'm so happy we got to have this conversation. I really am.
Me too.
That was Antwaun Sargent. I'm Parry Isan.
And I'm Jason E. Seawright. On the next episode, we'll take you into an amazing place. Here's a hint. You're going to want to start your engines.
We are located in the bowels of Beverly Hills, right in the center of downtown Beverly Hills. We have been here for over 40 years, collecting and storing and taking care of our clients' automobiles.
Rodeo Drive is not complete without cars, but who knew the best ones were buried 3 stories underground?
Rodeo Drive, the podcast, is presented by the Rodeo Drive Committee with the support of the City of Beverly Hills. To Rodeo Drive, the Heyman family, Beverly Wilshire, a Four Seasons Hotel, the Beverly Hills Conference and Visitors Bureau, and MCM.
Rodeo Drive, the podcast, is written by Francis Anderton, with editing and videography by Hans Fjellstedt. Brian Banks composed the theme music. Grace Fu is the production assistant. The executive producer is Lynn Winter.
Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join us on Instagram at Rodeo Drive. See you on the street.